Elena Carter moved quietly around the dining table, placing the plates of food one after another. The smell of roasted chicken filled the room, but there was no warmth in the air. It was late, far too late for dinner, but Mark always wanted things his way. He had come home after a long day of important meetings, and Elena, despite her own exhaustion, had waited to serve him. Mark sat at the head of the table, scrolling on his phone with one hand while holding a glass of wine in the other. His younger sister, Chloe, lounged nearby, smirking as if she enjoyed watching Elena move back and forth like a shadow. The clink of cutlery and the low hum of Mark's phone notifications were the only sounds in the room. Elena set down a bowl of salad, trying to steady her tired hands. She had spent the whole day running between laundry, cleaning, and preparing meals. She barely had a moment to sit. Earlier, the phone had rung, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen, but she had ignored it. There was no time for calls when chores piled up and Mark's temper could flare if something wasn't perfect. As Elena reached for the last serving dish, Mark leaned back in his chair, eyes glinting with cold amusement. "Look at her," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Our very own servant. Always running around, always trying to please." Chloe burst out laughing, tossing her hair back. "Well, isn't she lucky to have a place here at all?" she added. The word stung. "Servant." Elena froze for a moment, the dish heavy in her hands. Her heart thudded against her ribs, but she forced herself to keep moving, lowering the food onto the table without a word. Her face remained calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm brewing inside her. Resentment she had buried for years, now pushing against the walls of her silence. She sat down quietly at the far end of the table, folding her hands in her lap. Mark didn't even notice. He was too busy pouring more wine, too proud of his cruel little joke. Chloe, still grinning, leaned close to her brother, whispering something that made him chuckle. Elena lowered her gaze, willing herself not to cry. She had learned long ago that tears only gave Mark more power. Instead, she swallowed the pain, the word echoing again and again in her mind. Servant. She told herself it was just another night, just another insult to endure. But deep inside, something shifted. A tiny crack formed in the quiet wall she had built around her heart. Her thoughts drifted for a second to the call she had ignored earlier. Who had tried to reach her? And why did the thought of it keep tugging at her? As though it carried something important, something waiting to be discovered. She shook the thought away, focusing on the meal before her. Mark was speaking loudly now, bragging about his latest deal, while Chloe nodded in eager admiration. Elena sat in silence, her mind caught between the humiliation of the present and the faint whisper of an unknown future. One she couldn't yet imagine but somehow knew was coming. For now she endured, but in her eyes hidden beneath lowered lashes, a quiet fire had begun to glow. Once ambitious, Elena Carter had dreamed of finishing her degree in business administration and starting her own company. She was bright, hardworking, and full of ideas. Back then, she believed that with effort and determination, she could build a better life for herself. But all of that changed when she married Mark Carter. Mark was charming in the early days. He spoke with confidence, promised her a bright future, and told her they would rise together. Elena trusted him. When he lost his job a few years into their marriage, she dropped out of school to help him get back on his feet. She worked small jobs, cooked, cleaned, and supported him while he tried to recover. She believed in him more than she believed in herself. Years later, Mark had indeed recovered. He found success in business and began to earn well. But instead of being grateful for Elena's sacrifices, he acted as though she owed him everything. He controlled the household money, rarely gave her spending allowance, and constantly reminded her that without him, she was nothing. "Know your place," he would say when Elena asked for even small things. If she suggested an idea, he dismissed it. If she questioned his choices, he silenced her. In his eyes, he was the provider, the strong one, while she was simply the woman who kept the house running. His younger sister Chloe made things worse. She often visited, lounging around the house sipping wine, and mocking Elena with little jabs. "You're lucky, you know," Chloe would say with a smug smile. "Mark could have married anyone, but he chose you. You should be grateful." Elena would smile weakly, holding back her true feelings. She knew Chloe only repeated what Mark believed. Behind her quiet eyes, Elena carried heavy pain. She had no one to turn to. Her parents had died when she was young, leaving her with only one relative, her uncle, Henry Caldwell. He was a wealthy businessman, respected and powerful, but they had grown apart years ago. When Elena announced she was marrying Mark, Henry warned her to reconsider. He saw something in Mark that she refused to see then. They argued, and Elena walked away from him, choosing love over caution. From that day, she and her uncle barely spoke. Now she often wondered if Henry had been right, but it was too late. She was trapped in a marriage where her dreams had withered, and her sacrifices had been forgotten. Her life revolved around cleaning, cooking, and keeping the peace in a home where her worth was measured only by her silence. Elena tried not to let bitterness consume her. She told herself that patience was strength, that enduring quietly was the right path. Yet deep inside, she longed for more. She dreamed of finishing her studies, of building something for herself, of being seen as more than a servant in her own home. On most days, she buried those dreams beneath her duties. She woke early, cleaned, cooked, and prepared for Mark's return each night. She listened to his endless praise of himself, his complaints about her shortcomings, and Chloe's mocking words. To the outside world, she was the quiet wife of a successful man. No one knew how invisible she felt inside her own life. Still, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Even when humiliated, even when mocked, she never shouted back. She hid her pain behind lowered eyes and steady hands, saving her tears for the privacy of her room. Her silence was not weakness, though Mark believed it was. It was survival. What Elena did not know was that life had already begun to shift. The past she thought she had left behind, her uncle, his world, his wealth, was about to return in a way that would change everything. For now, she lived in the shadow of Mark's arrogance, waiting, without realizing it, for the moment she could finally step into her own light. Elena finally listens to the voicemail from a prestigious law firm. The voice on the other end is calm and formal, introducing himself as Mr. Graham, an attorney representing her late uncle, Henry Caldwell. Elena stops what she's doing, her hands trembling as she presses the phone tighter to her ear. "We regret to inform you," the lawyer says, "that Mr. Henry Caldwell has passed away. According to his will, you are named as the sole heir to his estate. We request that you contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the details." For a long moment, Elena just stands there, staring at the wall as the message replays in her mind. Sole heir? Estate? Her uncle? She sinks into the nearest chair, her knees weak. She hasn't spoken to Henry in years, not since their bitter argument about Mark. Why would he leave her anything, let alone his entire estate? The thought feels impossible, unreal. But the words echo again, sole heir. Her heart races, and her mind fills with questions. What estate? How much? Could this be a mistake? She listens to the message again, needing to be sure she hadn't imagined it. No, she heard it right. Henry Caldwell, her estranged uncle, had left her everything. The lawyer mentioned assets worth several $billion. Billion. Elena covers her mouth with her hand, unable to breathe for a moment. She had lived years with nothing but scraps of allowance from Mark, and now this? But instead of joy, fear rises in her chest. She imagines Mark's reaction. If he knew, he would take over everything, twist it in his favor, and remind her once again that she was nothing without him. She knows exactly how he would look at her, how he would turn her inheritance into his achievement. She can already hear his voice. "Of course he left it to you. But you wouldn't know what to do with it. Let me handle it." No. Not yet. Not now. Elena decides she must keep this to herself until she understands more. She slips her phone into her pocket just as she hears footsteps in the hallway. Mark enters the room, loosening his tie, his eyes sharp and searching. "You're quiet tonight," he says, studying her closely. "What's wrong with you?" Elena forces a small smile. "Nothing. Just tired." But Mark isn't convinced. He sets his glass down and narrows his eyes. "You think I don't notice when something is different? Don't try to hide things from me." His voice grows colder. A servant should never keep secrets from her master. The word cuts deep again, but Elena lowers her gaze, hiding the storm inside her. She cannot tell him. Not now. Mark leans back, watching her with suspicion, as if waiting for her to slip and confess. Elena swallows hard, her heart still pounding from the voicemail. She knows her life has just changed forever. She also knows that the most dangerous part has only just begun. For the first time in years, she holds something Mark cannot control. A secret that could shatter the balance of power in their marriage. And as she sits there in silence, pretending to be the obedient wife he expects, she wonders how long she can keep it hidden. And what will happen when he finally finds out? He controls Elena more harshly, as if the more she tries to keep to herself, the more he wants to trap her. Mark tells her what she can wear, what she can buy, even who she is allowed to speak to. When neighbors invite her to a small gathering, Mark snaps, "You don't belong there. You'll embarrass me." When she asks to attend a charity event, he laughs bitterly and says, "People like you don't fit in with real society." Every word cuts her down, but Elena stays quiet. She hides her secret, the inheritance, like a flame she must protect from the wind. Every morning, she wakes up to his commands, but in her heart, she knows she now has something he cannot control. Elena begins to secretly meet with Mr. Graham, her uncle's lawyer. She tells Mark she is going to the market or visiting the pharmacy, then slips away to the law office instead. There, she listens carefully as Mr. Graham explains the details of Henry Caldwell's will. Properties, businesses, accounts, assets worth billions. Elena listens with wide eyes, her hands clasped tightly together as she tries to believe this new reality. "Everything belongs to you now, Mrs. Carter," Mr. Graham says kindly. "Your uncle wanted you to have the life you deserve." Those words almost bring tears to her eyes, but fear quickly follows. If Mark discovers this before she is ready, he will twist it into his own victory. He will take control, and she will lose her one chance at freedom. At home, Elena begins to change in small ways. She buys a new dress, simple but elegant, and wears it without asking Mark's opinion. She lifts her chin a little higher when Chloe mocks her, replying softly but firmly, "I don't need your approval." She even begins to cook less, spending some afternoons reading documents Mr. Graham gives her instead of scrubbing the floors. These small acts of courage make her feel alive again, but they do not go unnoticed. Mark watches her with growing suspicion. One evening he points at her new dress and sneers, "Since when do you care about how you look? Who are you trying to impress?" Elena swallows her fear and answers calmly, "I want to feel good for myself." Her steady voice unsettles him. He slams his glass on the table. "Don't get ideas, Elena. You're nothing without me. Remember that." But deep inside, Elena knows that is no longer true. The tension grows heavier each day. Mark follows her movements more closely, asking where she goes, demanding to see receipts, checking her phone when she leaves it unattended. Elena learns to guard her secrets more carefully, deleting messages from Mr. Graham and hiding letters inside old recipe books Mark never touches. Then one afternoon, Mark finds a business card from the law firm in her handbag. He storms into the kitchen, waving it in her face. "What is this? Why are you meeting with a lawyer? Are you planning to divorce me? Is that what this is about?" Elena freezes. She wants to tell him the truth, but fear locks her lips. "It's nothing," she whispers. "Nothing." Mark shouts, his face red with anger. "Don't lie to me, Elena. I know when you're hiding something. You think you can play games behind my back." From that moment, his cruelty doubles. He becomes sharper with his words, colder with his stares. At dinner with family friends, he finally unleashes his rage. Elena serves the food quietly, her hands steady, but Mark smirks and lifts his glass. "You all think she's the perfect wife," he says loudly, his words dripping with bitterness. "But let me tell you, this woman is useless. She's nothing more than a servant. Without me, she wouldn't last a single day." The room falls silent. Guests glance uncomfortably at one another, while Chloe chuckles softly, clearly enjoying her brother's cruelty. Elena feels her face burn, humiliation pressing down on her like a heavy stone. For a moment she wants to run away, to disappear. But another part of her, stronger than before, whispers, "Not much longer. Soon he will see who I truly am." She lowers her gaze, hiding the spark of defiance in her eyes. The storm inside her is no longer quiet. It is building, waiting for the right moment to break free. And Mark, blind in his arrogance, does not see that the power he thinks he holds over her is slipping away with every cruel word he speaks. At a family gathering Mark arranged to show off his success, the house was filled with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Mark stood tall in the middle of the room, his arm around Chloe, proudly telling everyone about his latest business deal. Guests nodded politely, some impressed, others simply pretending. Elena moved quietly through the crowd, offering drinks, making sure the food was in order, just as she always did. But tonight was different. Tonight, Elena had come prepared. As Mark bragged about his hard work and brilliance, Elena's heart pounded. For weeks she had carried the weight of a secret that could change everything. She looked around at the guests, neighbors, business partners, distant relatives, all of them listening to Mark as if he was the only person in the room who mattered. And then she thought of all the years she had stayed silent, swallowing pain, living as a shadow. Not anymore. When the noise died down for a moment, Elena stepped forward. Her voice was calm but steady. "I have something to say." Heads turned toward her. Mark glanced at her with annoyance, as if she had interrupted his performance. "Elena, this isn't the time." But she didn't stop. "My uncle, Henry Caldwell, passed away recently," she continued, her eyes scanning the room. "And according to his will, I am his sole heir. His entire estate now belongs to me." The room fell into stunned silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People exchanged shocked looks, whispering behind their hands. Chloe's wine glass slipped from her fingers and clattered against the table. Mark burst out laughing, his voice sharp and mocking. "What nonsense is this? Do you expect us to believe such a lie? You an heir? Don't make me laugh." Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a neat folder. She laid it on the table, opening it to reveal official documents from Mr. Graham's law firm. The lawyer himself had even sent a sealed letter confirming her inheritance. She placed it where everyone could see. "This is the truth," Elena said firmly. "Henry Caldwell left everything to me, his businesses, his properties, his fortune. I am not anyone's servant. I am his heir." The laughter died on Mark's lips. His face paled as his eyes darted over the papers. The guests leaned in, murmuring in disbelief. Some stared at Elena with new respect, while others studied Mark, waiting to see his reaction. For the first time in years, Mark had nothing to say. The same man who always controlled the conversation, who always belittled Elena, now stood frozen in shock. His power, his pride, his arrogance. It all slipped away in a single moment. Chloe quickly tried to recover, stepping forward with a forced smile. "Well, Elena, dear, I always knew you had potential. We're family after all. I'm sure you'll want us by your side as you handle all these responsibilities." Elena turned to her, her eyes steady and unflinching. "No, Chloe. You mocked me, laughed at me, treated me as if I were less than nothing. Don't pretend now." Her voice carried strength, and Chloe stepped back, her smile fading. Finally, Elena faced Mark. Her hands no longer trembled. Her voice no longer shook. "For years I served this house, not because I was weak, but because I believed in love and duty. I cooked, cleaned, and sacrificed my dreams because I thought that was what a wife should do. I stood by you when you had nothing. I gave you respect, even when you gave me none." Mark's jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists, but he said nothing. "You mistook my patience for weakness," Elena continued, her eyes burning with quiet fire. "You thought you could crush me with your words, control me with your money, humiliate me in front of others. But now you see, I was never powerless. I chose silence, but I will not be silent anymore." The room remained hushed, every eye on Elena. For once she stood taller than Mark, her voice stronger than his pride. "I am Henry Caldwell's heir," she said, her words cutting through the air like a blade. "And I will decide my own life from this moment forward." Mark's face twisted with anger and disbelief, but he had no weapon left. His insults, his control, his arrogance, all had crumbled in front of everyone. The man who had called her a servant now stood powerless before the woman he had underestimated. The guests whispered again, this time with awe. Elena closed the folder and held it close to her chest. She didn't need their approval, nor Mark's. She had already won. And in that crowded room, Elena finally felt what she had been denied for so long: freedom. Elena quietly leaves Mark, packing her few personal things without making a scene. She doesn't shout or argue. She doesn't need to. The decision is already made. With the help of Mr. Graham, she moves into her uncle's grand estate. For the first time in her life, she walks into a home that is truly hers. Not a place where she is ordered around, but a place where she decides what happens. At first, the silence feels strange. She is no longer rushing to serve meals, no longer waiting for Mark's approval, no longer listening to Chloe's mocking voice. Instead, she wakes up to peace. She walks through wide halls filled with portraits of her uncle and shelves of books he once read. Slowly, she begins to breathe again, as though she had been holding her breath for years, and is only now learning how to let it go. Elena starts to rebuild the life she once dreamed of. She reaches out to old friends she had lost touch with, people she had quietly avoided because Mark disliked them. They welcome her back warmly, surprised but happy to see the change in her. She enrolls again in business courses, determined to finish what she left behind so many years ago. This time, she studies not out of obligation but because she believes in herself. Her uncle's wealth gives her power, but Elena chooses to use it with care. She invests in causes that matter to her, supporting women who have been silenced like she once was, funding scholarships for students who need help, donating to shelters. Each decision heals a part of her heart. Each act of giving reminds her that she was never weak, she simply needed the chance to stand on her own. Mark, meanwhile, cannot accept losing control. At first, he sends messages filled with anger and insults. Then when those don't work, his tone changes. He shows up at her estate one afternoon, his face pale and desperate. "Elena," he pleads, his voice softer than she has ever heard. "I made mistakes. I was under pressure. We can start again. Let's put the past behind us." For a moment, Elena studies him. The man who once seemed so powerful, now standing like a beggar at her door. But she feels no hatred, no desire for revenge, only clarity. His words, spoken so many times before, now sound empty. "No, Mark," she says gently but firmly. "You showed me who you are. I believed in you once, but you only wanted to control me. You called me a servant when I was giving you everything I had. That told me all I needed to know." He tries again, but Elena turns away. Not out of anger, but out of dignity. She has nothing left to prove, and nothing left to lose. Days turn into weeks, and Elena grows stronger. She dresses with confidence, speaks with courage, and walks with her head held high. She is no longer the quiet woman serving in the shadows. She is Henry Caldwell's heir, yes, but more importantly, she is herself again. The woman who once endured in silence has transformed into someone in full control of her destiny. And for the first time in years, Elena smiles. Not because someone allows her to, but because she finally owns her life. Elena walks alone through her uncle's library, the soft sound of her footsteps echoing against the polished wooden floor. The room smells of old paper and leather, a quiet world filled with shelves of heavy books that once belonged to Henry Caldwell. She runs her fingers gently across the spines, feeling the history, the knowledge, the weight of everything she has inherited. She pauses in the middle of the room, her eyes drifting to the tall windows where sunlight spills in. For a long moment, she just stands there, breathing deeply, letting the silence wrap around her like a blanket. Then, in a soft voice meant only for herself, she whispers, "I was never a servant. I was just waiting for my freedom." Her words hang in the air, and suddenly her eyes fill with tears. Not the tears of sorrow she once cried late at night, hidden from Mark's cruel words. These are different. Tears of release, of letting go, of finally stepping out of the shadow where she had lived for too long. She smiles through the tears, her heart lighter than it has been in years. Every insult, every humiliation, every moment of silence she endured has led her here, to this place of strength. She is no longer trapped. She is no longer afraid. Slowly, Elena turns toward the door. Her hand lingers on the frame for a moment, as though she is saying goodbye to the woman she used to be, the quiet, broken version of herself who stayed silent for too long. Then she pulls the door closed with steady hands. The click of the door echoes softly, final and sure. It is the sound of an ending, but also of a beginning. Elena walks away with quiet strength, not needing applause or recognition. She carries her victory in her heart, certain and unshakable. Her old life has ended, and a new one has just begun. Hey friends, thanks so much for sticking with me till the end. Sparkling heart, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button for more. See you next time. Waving hand sparkles.